Hey there, welcome to episode 101 of the Quaggling Sand audio program. I'm your host, Dan Hugo. We are recording this later in the day than usual, 3:40 p.m. Pacific time on Wednesday, October 15th, 2025. We normally publish on Wednesdays, so we just might make it. Today's title and topic, Autodidactic Polymath. Yeah, what a mouthful. If you are one, then you know what that means. If you're not, I don't know what to tell you. The Quaggling Sand audio program, if you're not familiar, is basically an audio essay, not really room for guests. I haven't really explored inviting others on. It's pretty much stories, tales, recollections, wanderings down memory lane. Sometimes interesting, sometimes not. We'll find out. About me. It's a very self-centered show. I say that's why we don't need guests. I got plenty of stuff. Well, I don't know. Actually, I'm 101 episodes. I might be running out of stories. We'll see. We shall see. Quaggling sand itself is a technical term. You may have heard it. If you've ever sat on your foot, fallen asleep on your arm, been sitting funny, whatever that really means, you may have discovered a numbness in your leg or your foot or your arm or your hand or maybe your head, who knows. And then as circulation returns to wherever that might be, you will feel the sensation of quaggling sand. Now you may be used to using the layman's term, pins and needles, but now you know. Now you know. Hopefully wherever you found this audio program, and hopefully there are a couple more places you're able to do that, you will locate the episode description, which contains the show notes, including a one-sentence summary, which I'll read here, now, soon, and then some links. I've cut down the shameless self-promotion links to two links, and then there are 4 links for today's episode, topical links. So let's get started so we can get finished on this Wednesday, mid-afternoon, I guess. The summary is thus: I cannot say that I'm a true believer that anyone can be self-taught, but I do okay most of the time, and I like to know everything, if possible, about everything. The links for today's episode: Quaggling Sand homepage at quagglingsand.com, no spaces, quaggling, spelled like it sounds, QUOGGLINGSAND. You probably see that in a title wherever you found this audio program, quagglingsand.com. I'm slowly but surely transitioning the various web properties I have for my audio productions to Tailwind CSS. So I guess in keeping with the theme of today's title and topic, in fact, of today's show, I'm learning how Tailwind works. Unfortunately, it's really hard to learn aesthetics, so that will take longer, but I'm using the latest and greatest in utility class-based styling of HTML website content. So hopefully, if and when you listen to this particular episode, if you visit quagglingsand.com, it will be continuing to transition towards something of a usable, interesting, I don't know about attractive website. I'm hoping to, at least I'm still using the usual places. So published to Spotify for creators, it fans out to Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, Spotify, of course. There's an RSS feed, and we do have the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@quagglingsand. So our audio programs are converted to video. They automatically use the cover art for a 1-frame video. Video content in the future? Maybe. We'll see. I don't know about, maybe if I had some way of illustrating my stories, but we didn't all have cameras in our pockets continuously back in the day, so we'll see. We'll see what comes of it. And then the profile page linking everything. It's still at buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. I've had that page there for like 5 years. I cannot say, I think 5 people maybe have actually bought me a coffee, so to speak. So it's not there to pay bills or anything. You can if you want. You're welcome to contribute. You're under no obligation to do so. I do have some affiliate links there as well for products and services that I actually use. I don't really push them too hard because I use them. If you find anything interesting there, great. I do have links to all of my audio programs, all of the associated YouTube channels, homepages, Spotify for creator profile pages that have more relevant links to find content and so on. So buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. If you're curious, yes, of course, Ko-fi.com/DanHugo, still available, still around, still publishing coffee solo. So check that out as well. Hey, guess what? It's linked from the profile page, linking everything. Today's episode has 4 links, as I mentioned. Autodidactism, Wikipedia. Actually, all 4 are Wikipedia links. I'll just get that off. Get that sorted right up front. Autodidactism is teaching oneself. Depending on how strict you want to be, you're basically not attending a class or receiving specific instruction from a teacher or a training person or an instructor or teacher. Did I say teacher? Professor. So you're kind of on your own. I would make an argument that that's almost impossible to do nowadays, but we'll touch on that later. Polymath. So the title, Autodidactic Polymath. A polymath is somebody who gains some level of expertise in more than one topic. If you just know one, if you're just an expert in one topic, you're not a polymath. You're just a math. Solo math, maybe Uno math. But no, polymath is somebody who gains a level of expertise. And if you read the Wikipedia article, it goes into some detail about type 1 through type 4, and there's different aspects and things to think about. I think a polymath is somebody who not only gathers and retains and assembles information. You know what? I got to include the Bloom taxonomy in here. I'm calling it audible. The Bloom taxonomy. Hang on while I've talked about this before though. But okay, Bloom's I'll tack it on the end. Bloom's taxonomy. Okay, so polymath, gathering a lot of topics together, becoming an expert in air quotes in more than one. So you may be, sometimes they'll say someone's a triple threat, or they can sing, they can dance, they can act, they can cook, they can bake. There you go. Baking is hard. Pastries, pastry chef, and actor. Oh, anyway, anyone who has a lot of skills, talents, knowledge. I don't know if I would include like physical talents in there, but maybe. I mean, if you're casting a wide net, sure. So if you're good at sports and STEM, for example, more power to you. Polymath. It's a good word. Dunning-Kruger effect. That's what happens when someone thinks they are a polymath, but everybody around them knows they are not, or figures it out eventually. The Dunning-Kruger, I've talked about this one before. It's funny to see when I look these links up, I see that they are, I don't know if people still use color codes, but the historically standard blue underscore link is a new link, and sort of a purplish underscored link is one that has been visited before and is still in your browser cache. So all of these were purple. So yeah, the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's essentially when someone believes that they are more knowledgeable about something than they really are. So they don't quite know what they don't know. So they figure what they think they do know is sufficient or even superior to what others around them know. So it's kind of a false sense of expertise. But hey, you can read the Wikipedia page about it and get more information. Flipped classroom. I am an advocate for the flipped classroom, although I don't have any outlet for that advocacy. Basically, I just talk to myself about that. The flipped classroom, that's where you, if you're a student or in general, you do the homework at home. You learn about the subject at home, so you're kind of self-teaching. So if the homework is do the reading, okay, and then do the homework, okay, but in the classroom, you're talking about with your peers doing the homework and doing the reading. So the social part of learning takes place in the classroom, where instead of being lectured to, you are discussing with your peers and the teacher, if there is one, and usually there is, especially if you're in a public school system, the teacher can guide the discussions, but rather than having everyone face forward in the classroom being talked at, it's a much more interactive and I would say more productive use of time. So learning at one's own pace, perhaps, and then being in the classroom, you can sort of you'll figure out soon if you're falling behind or if you're leading the way and so on. Is that a bad thing? Well, it depends. It depends on whether the classroom is a cohesive group of coherent learners and they can collaborate on that learning effort. Maybe your peers figured out some way of understanding the material that you can gather that through osmosis or discussion or both. So it turns out I think I was really having my own flipped classroom in my travels, but we'll see. Finally, the Bloom's taxonomy. When I was very young, I was in I'll just say an experimental program for teaching students that were bored in class often. The Bloom's taxonomy, when I was a kid, started out with knowledge, going up the taxonomy. So knowledge, okay, 2 + 2 = 4. Comprehension, what does that actually mean on the number line? And to add quantities together as offsets, right? 0 to 2 and then 2 to 4, that's 2 + 2. Application, okay, now I have $2 and somebody gives you $2. Now you have $4. Analysis might be understanding what summation of integers really means, maybe beyond the timeline, number line. Did I say timeline before? Number line. So analysis is how integers work, and maybe you might even get into real numbers, rational numbers, irrational numbers. So you might start understanding more what it means to do just basic arithmetic functions. Synthesis might be where you come up with your own way of doing math. And it has been done. Even lately, we're seeing more and more situations where young people are solving long-standing mathematical challenges, discovering new theorems, and so on. So it can happen. And evaluation is where you kind of, it's the pinnacle of understanding about a particular topic. You can judge good from bad, correct from incorrect, based on subtle nuance, perhaps. You maybe set your own standards for judging these things. So evaluation is, if you are knowledgeable on a subject, if you consider yourself expert, then you can ideally judge quality of information, accuracy, precision, subject matter expertise. I think that would probably sum that up. So the Bloom's taxonomy, I think that's been missing in the world. I think people usually stop at knowledge, whatever they got from YouTube or Wikipedia. And then as I always tell people, when you are looking for knowledge, if you're looking to understand, knowledge being that first tier of the Bloom taxonomy, you might begin at Wikipedia, and maybe you can include YouTube in there, but rarely should your quest end there. So it really takes more practical interaction with material and so on to ascend the Bloom's taxonomy. Now, we'll point out that that's the old Bloom's taxonomy. After 2001, they made some adjustments. Is this on here? The revised taxonomy. I guess they reworded it to be. I guess I'm not going to eschew these. I think both would be relevant. I think having both the old and new Bloom taxonomy for any purpose of discussion would be useful. The new Bloom taxonomy going up: remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, create. So I'll leave that to you to pursue. This is all from that Wikipedia page, but you should continue with your quest for knowledge about that if you so desire. Anyway, the Bloom's taxonomy. I think if you are an autodidactic polymath, you're working in the upper 3 levels. The bottom 3 are kind of reflexive at some point. And that program I mentioned, that was the goal, to get students who had the tendency, the desire, the intellectual curiosity to actually operate in the full range of Bloom's taxonomy. Is it Bloom's or the Bloom? Is it Bloom's taxonomy? It is, yeah, Bloom's taxonomy, Bloom. You can look for that on Wikipedia if you don't have the link in front of you. Anyway, yeah, to work in the full range, or definitely focus on the upper 3 layers of it, because most public school systems teach the first 3, and we can argue about whether they really teach all 3. And now on with the show. Some 17 minutes in, according to my timer here. Well, 1640, something like that. This is mostly true, the whole thing. I have seen people describe themselves as autodidactic polymaths. You can sometimes see that on a LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn, that's a pile of hot garbage, but that's for another time. And the people I have known who describe themselves in that way have fallen all over a full range of mostly true to mostly not true. I myself would say I'm somewhere in the middle of that range, possibly leaning towards true. In other words, it's hard to, it sounds like kind of a humble brag, I suppose, but I guess the proof is in the pudding, as they say. But I read a lot, and I try to understand things that I'm curious about. So I like to think I have a certain level of above average level of intellectual curiosity, and I act on it. And then usually I'm able to synthesize notions based on disparate learnings, apply one thing to something else. Autodidacts will say they are self-taught. I mean, that's what the word is. But even a quick glance at that Wikipedia article will highlight some nuance there. Much as doing my own research, which became very popular during the pandemic era, which we might still be in for all I know, usually begins with reading Wikipedia articles and or watching YouTube videos about some topic. An autodidact in modern times is probably reading books or articles, or maybe even watching those YouTube videos, and maybe a bit more selective, choosing all of these. So the casual person is doing their own research. Then autodidact is probably diving in a little bit more and being a little bit more selective. While this is not quite sitting in a classroom for formal instruction, it is benefiting from tutelage in these other forms. So calling yourself self-taught, but reading and consuming these other materials, other media, that's not really self-taught. It's a different version of a different form of learning in a non-traditional classroom setting, right? Truly teaching oneself is almost certainly much harder than it seems. It's easier to make the claim, but I think it's harder to actually do in these modern times. Are you going to self-teach? Actually, I'm reading a book right now about the history of the development of the atomic bomb, the nuclear weapons. And it goes way back to like fundamental scientific principles. The old time physics curriculum there were teachers, there were professors, there were learned people teaching others, but a ton of the technology that was developed during that crucial period in human history was the result of just literally figuring stuff out. Those are people that were self-taught. And usually when you're self-taught, you are starting out with things that others have taught you. You have a starting point. As Sir Isaac Newton famously said, "If I have seen further, it is because I stand on the shoulders of giants." I'm paraphrasing, I'm not looking at it, so that's pretty close, I think. So just on whose shoulders is an autodidact standing and on any particular topic, that can vary. So I think claiming to be self-taught is nuanced. Actually being a polymath is easier, in my opinion, so long as we accept that achieving an expert level of proficiency is difficult for the best of us in one field. Just pick one thing and be an expert at it. That's hard enough. Time and experience are not magically doubled or tripled for some lucky few. I think it is far more likely that a polymath becomes an expert or nearly expert over time at one or two, maybe one or two more things than some statistically normal person. Let me correct a little typo here. So, normal in air quotes, I suppose. But a normal person might become an expert in one thing, and then they're good at other things, but they're like, this is my thing, my jam. Just because you're a Polymath doesn't mean I learn when I'm sleeping, maybe, but there is only so much time in the day. So if you can learn one or two more things and become expert at those things, then one or two more things than some statistically normal person, and can become quite good at many other things, better enough than those around to appear to be an expert, perhaps. Maybe that's what a polymath really is. I do not consider myself to be expert at everything, certainly, but I know a lot about a lot of things, and I know I do not know a lot about a lot more things. Maybe that is one of the essential pieces of expertise to maintain as a polymath. We got to have known knowns and unknown unknowns, somewhere in between there. The only good quote from that guy. So practicality, though, I have run into many people, some too closely, and I've been around them for too long, who make others around them suffer their Dunning-Kruger effect, where they are quite sure they are polymath, often autodidact. That word, you got to have some emphasis, familiarity with that term. Often autodidact, but in fact, they are just normal people, maybe a little bit more ignorant than those around them. I'm thinking of one or two who were particularly good at belittling people around them with their incorrect knowledge. So I say that they're a little bit more ignorant because if you think you know things that you don't, that's worse, I think, than just not knowing things, right? Because now you're giving people the false impression, or you're trying to, that you do know things. And even worse, you might be making decisions based on things that you not only don't know, but that you think you do know, but you actually and actively do not. So non-trivial. My roommate in college was good at everything. No, I'm just kidding. And he learned ridiculously quickly, that was annoying. But, hey, what are you going to do? He's a smart guy. He was particularly good with classwork, homework, so formal teaching. He was very good at learning from that. But he also did pick up new skills on his own just as fast. He was a quick study, as they say. And he was really good at a lot of things across all of the subject matter. When we were in college, he was a smart student in general, very talented, a reasonably personable person. So not like a maladjusted super nerd who couldn't interact with other humans. So a well-rounded individual, I think we might say. This is one example coming to mind of a true polymath, in my opinion, somewhat autodidactic, though it was never obvious to me that he was driven to learn new things. What does that mean? Well, he was happy to own as many different gaming consoles as possible and play video games daily, watch sports on television in the old days when there was TV, and whatnot. So maybe not a driven autodidact. Surely there is a chunk of population out there in this boat. So for as smart as he was and is, I didn't find him putting down the game controller to go pick up on some new topic. This is not a bad thing. It's just an observation. So probably if I said, hey, how does, I don't know, how does this vaccine work? He would do some reading and whatnot. And so he was definitely not avoiding learning new things, but I just didn't find the sort of an innovator attitude towards learning new things for the sake of learning new things, if that makes sense. And that's just an observation, though. It's for the sake of argument. I myself consider myself to be something of a polymath to a point, and definitely feel I'm a motivated autodidact. I tend to pursue some topic areas with more focus if there is a need to. So on the one hand, I have really become more and more interested in history and what we can actually learn from the past. And the George Santayana quote on this topic, so I won't rehash it here. But if I am working on our Agile for Volunteers initiative foundation, for the foundation, for example, I am reading about Agile methodologies and best practices so I can apply those. If I'm working on a project with an 8051 microcontroller, back in the Philips days, for example, and also Leapfrog, I am keeping 8051 assembly language front of mind, and I am doing hex bit masks reflexively. Today, I have no such memories handy because I'm not doing that day to day. So maybe I'm in the matrix. Maybe just plug that in the back and load up my 8051 program. So in other words, I learn what I need to learn to accomplish what I need to accomplish, to quote one of our America's Greatest Maker contestants back in the day. But I don't have to retain everything if I can store some of that information in the world and not clutter my already cluttered mind with all sorts of other trivialities. Getting started, like like when do you know, or how does this work? For me and my timeline, I can't say that I'm good at finding typos ahead of time. For me and my timeline, I have to say any proclivities I have in either autodidactism or polymathicism, is that a word? I don't know, were brought out early on thanks to two specific things. Learning to read. Surely there are photos of myself reading Dr. Seuss to my mom when I was, 2 years old. And my parents both creating a pro-ideation environment in our home for as long as I've known them. Legos and Tinker Toys, Lincoln Logs, more Legos. These were the things to have around, and books, more interesting over time. Once I learned to read, there was no stopping me. An encyclopedia set, that was probably, that's a bit of a game changer in those early days. Now, who needs encyclopedias? We have the internet. Who knows what you're going to come across there. And access to libraries. And you can flip back to the Meet Me at the Library episode of this very audio program for more about libraries and my experience in and with them. A trip to Channel 13, where Sesame Street was taped back in those days. Seeing Star Wars in the theater when it came out. Ours was really a Star Trek home, to be honest. But Star Wars was in there, and seeing that in the theater is one of those memories that, science fiction does have science fact in it some ways, and there have been countless essays and video productions focusing on how modern technology owes quite a bit to young people being inspired by what they saw on the small and big screens. So I think I agree with that. The list in those early years goes on of these sorts of little facets, these little nuggets that all sum together over time. One day, one of my peers in maybe fourth grade or so, his name was Bill something, was for some reason choosing automotive knowledge as a weapon against me and suggested that I did not know how a carburetor worked, how a carburetor functioned, I suppose. He probably said worked, so I'll say worked. Who does my typing? Sadly, he was correct, but not for much longer than that. Post haste, I knew just about every aspect of a basic carbureted internal combustion engine. Just needed to read. This is a general theme for a few years in there. I was much more motivated to learn the details about things that interested me and the things that I did not know. If those two collided, so much the better. Hence the bookmarks in the encyclopedia set and the heavy use of the library card. Every time I came across something interesting, I'd bookmark it, but I don't know that I ever went back to those bookmarks. I mean, why? I already knew it. Not to mention hanging out in bookstores if I had time to kill at the mall. Bookstores were a destination of sorts. Looking back, surely my K through 8, that's kindergarten through 8th grade years, would have been better for me in a flipped classroom environment. Probably. I was basically doing that anyway. So I was one of the bored kids in class, the errand runners. Dan, you're done with everything? Okay, can you run to the office and... Sure. Which is interesting because when you do that, and when you're younger, everybody gets to know you because you're wandering through the hallways, and they kind of eventually say, they don't even ask. Like, do you have a hall pass? Oh, wait, no, I know. Dan's walking through the hallway. It's all good. He's bored. Drinking some yerba mate. High school began a more interesting interval in my educational career with switching of classes through the day, which kept things a little bit more interesting. More hands-on labs in the sciences. I was a couple of years ahead with math, and while our history and government teachers were not great, English and literature, similar, there was enough to seed future readings and interest in general. So I guess you got to start somewhere. While high school was not a total game changer for me, it was maybe the on-ramp. And it was later in that time frame that I realized that pursuing grades was the wrong measurement for me. Sure, getting A's is fine, a little ego boost perhaps. It's always nice when you're setting the curve, and that's some bragging rights. Like, oh, of course, Dan got the high score again. And that was a thing for a while, but it became less interesting and less important to me. And but as my classmates were thinking of valedictorian and making graduation speeches as the the greatest year, what is it? The best years of our lives were coming to an end until the next year. And then you start to realize, oh, that was just high school. I was moving away from that whole idea. Like, I don't remember exactly. I was not even in the top 10 graduating students by grade in high school. So then I would go on to Harvey Mudd College. I attended Harvey Mudd College, an interesting institution back then. Maybe now as well. I don't really keep in touch, though that maybe that's a discussion for another time. I first heard of this school when we met with my high school guidance counselor, Alan Osmond, because I was so far ahead in math. He said, maybe you'd be interested in something like MIT or Caltech or Harvey Mudd. And I said, what's that last one? And yes, Henry Mudd references in Star Trek with the Tribbles, Harvard Med, like Harvard Medical School. Oh, you're going to Harvard? No, Harvey Mudd. It's a mining rich person who, anyway. And to be fair, someone who makes a lot of money in California and starts a learning institution, Stanford did okay with that. Leland Stanford started a little school in Stanford, strangely enough, named for his son, not for himself. You can read about that. He made money on picks and shovels and decided to make a venture capital company with a university, a college, Stanford University attached to it. I guess there are multiple colleges. Anyway, the path was formed thanks to Alan Osmond a little over 2 years before arriving at Harvey Mudd. I sometimes think MIT would have been as interesting, maybe more so, maybe, but in an entirely different way. I had the good fortune, I suppose, to interact with some MIT people in my Intel travels in the Maker Innovator group. I found myself thinking, it probably would have been pretty cool, but totally different to be at a much larger and just entirely different culture center that is and was at the time MIT. Would it have been as educational? Maybe, probably. I mean, just a different environment completely. It's a different approach. I think it's a little bit closer to a traditional, I don't know. I didn't go there. I honestly don't know. But Mudd definitely focused on learning how to learn when I was there. Ultimately, it was a great program for me. Although, again, grades were not important to me, which is easy to say now. After the first year, and by the way, our first semester was pass-fail when we were focused on our major and minor concentrations, though. So freshman year of Harvey Mudd College is basically high school part 2. So the curriculum is pretty much transitional. Yes, you're learning math, physics, chemistry, biology, but you're taking everything you knew in high school as your first couple of weeks, couple of months, and then you're starting to pour on the gas. There was a mix of, I have never come across this though. Once you enter your sophomore year, second year of Mudd, and you're pursuing engineering or, real chemistry, real physics. I've never come across this since we were outside of the high school curriculum as a introduction. I actually need to do some learning on my own time was a new thing. There was when we first started during orientation, the dean of students at the time, Michael Capetto, had a presentation. All of our entering class of 151 entering freshmen for that year, class of 93, if you're curious, 151 people. So he said, okay, I need this first row here, 15 students. And there were parents there as well. So we had the big lecture hall with the partitions open to accommodate everyone. So I think people, almost everybody fit, if I'm not mistaken. So he says, he says, how many of you in this in this lecture hall, were in the top 10% of your graduating class when you were in high school? Stand up. And everybody stood up. Everybody, 151 people stood up. I was still in the top 10%. I think I was in the top 20%, but I was definitely in the top 10%. I was not in the top 10 though, but top 10%. He said, okay, now this first row, these 15 of you stay standing. Now everybody else sit down. He said, this will be the size of the top 10% of your class. Think about that. So it was a bit of an eye opener, but that depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If you're saying I need to be in the top 10% based on my grades, that's a different mindset. It was even more true about the I need to actually learn stuff, maybe on my own with the E54 lab, which I described in the labs episode of this very program. and perhaps elsewhere, definitely elsewhere in my curriculum during my time there, and our clinic projects, which I chose to pursue in both my junior year for the whole year. Normally, it was a one semester sort of introduction to clinic. Clinic being a externally sponsored project. So some third party company would come to the college, Harvey Mudd College, propose a clinic project. There would be a group of students who would work on it as a class, part of a required class for seniors and a required semester long class for juniors. So I did it all year. And I chose, that was my choice. And then a full year for a senior year, these were entirely self-directed, like student consultancies working on these projects. So there was no classroom, there was no lecture, there was no actual interaction with the professor. So any technology developments, any progress made in approaching and completing these projects was 100% student driven, sort of like real life when you really think about it. So good preparation for real life, but definitely a great way to apply all of this self-direction, autodidactism, being a polymath. When we had these projects, there was bound to be something that was not spelled out ahead of time, that was not well understood. Occasionally the problem at hand would benefit from some solution that was out of left field, so to speak. So having some experience out in left field would be useful. So being some version of a polymath in development was handy. My experience in this time frame during college also cemented my opinion regarding the value of college education to whatever degree one pursues one, maybe through more than one institution. So maybe you'll go get your master's from some other place, maybe pursue a PhD. I already mentioned that I stopped chasing grades in my high school experience, when my high school experience was drawing to a close. It was my summer at ASU, Arizona State University, during the summer after my sophomore year in college. I took linear algebra and differential equations I took it at Harvey Mudd College. Harvey Mudd prided itself on having the different disciplines taught by those departments. So the math department would teach linear algebra, differential equations, partial differential equations, calculus to get started, and whatever else came along. and they were really, really out in the weeds. Mathematicians are a special bunch. So I wasn't doing well. So I dropped the classes and I took them over the summer at ASU, and ASU has a well-respected engineering college. So when I signed up for linear algebra and differential equations at the same time for their summer program, I took them from the engineering department. So all of the linear algebra and differential equations that they were teaching were geared towards engineering. So they were engineering centric. And I had already taken my sophomore year of engineering courses. So part of our sophomore curriculum, just the very beginnings, the basics, included systems, which included Laplace transforms. So that's Laplace and Fourier transforms are a way to work with they do a lot of things, but you can work with modeling transfer functions and system design by manipulating differential equation models using these transforms. And I'll leave that there. But so linear algebra, differential equations in that setting. So when I took these two classes, first of all, the linear algebra class was interesting. I ended up getting over 100% of the available points. That the professor of that class asked if he could use some of the stuff I had turned in, my homework and extra credit and all that, for his classes. I said, yeah, sure. So to say that was a more inviting environment was an understatement. For differential equations, the professor comes in, I think he was wearing like Tevas and cargo shorts, an older guy, probably my age now. He comes in, he's like, hey, how's it going? Okay, how many people in this class are engineering or physics? Everybody raise their hand. How many of you are juniors or seniors? I was a sophomore, so I was not yet a junior, so interstitial. Everybody raised their hand except for me. How many people in this room have taken basic circuit theory and whatever else? I was the only one who raised my hand. Oh, okay. So he said, okay, so our differential equations class will only cover the things that you've covered in your engineering coursework. Okay. So that was sufficient. If you've done spring damper, then you've done basic RCL. So things like this were fine. It was still educational. Now, when transferring credits from other colleges to Harvey Mudd College, they would accept the grade of a B or a better as a pass. So I didn't actually get the B, or an A, actually. So linear algebra, I got an A, whatever, A plus, I guess. For differential equations, I did the math, and I determined that for the final exam of differential equations, I needed to get one question correct on the final, and the entire final was on Laplace transforms, which I had just done an entire semester of in systems. So I finished a couple of the problems. I knew they were correct, and I turned it in, and I left early. That's always a boss move, right? Or I guess a baller move now. So merely going to college, maybe getting that 4.0 GPA might not be, or it might be good for getting that first job. Some people will say, oh, you went to ASU and got a 4.0. Oh, you went to Harvey Mudd and you got a 3.0. But when I think about being in that room with people who would be my peers, who would be perhaps hiring me someday, thinking we did a lot more deep diving, maybe not worrying about grades. They had the fictitious grade multiplier. Oh, you went to Harvey Mudd, then we'll multiply your GPA by like 1.2. That didn't happen. So if you're just looking at an opaque number like a GPA, you're not getting any sort of context. And that's when the reputation of the school comes to mind. But Harvey Mudd, nobody knew about what's Harvey Mudd. Is that the Tribble guy? So what were these students learning? I don't even know, but that's what I said. I think the program at Harvey Mudd for me was good. I wouldn't fully realize that for some time after I graduated, but I think it was good. My fellow students, though, the ones in that classroom, for example, they were learning as much as they could, perhaps as much as they wanted to, maybe. It was my backup option, by the way, the Regent Scholarship at ASU. But I'm glad things worked out the way they did. Honestly, I think this might be a longer story arc over decades, with college and continuing education a checkbox without real meaning for some people. Like you just go and get your liberal arts degree or something because I got to go to college. And one of the unexpected wins of Harvey Mudd was actually at Claremont McKenna, the 5 Claremont colleges. We could cross-register and so on. And I probably should have taken more advantage of that. I did take advantage of it. I took classes at Pitzer, Pomona. Did I take a class at Pomona? I think so. And Claremont McKenna and Harvey Mudd. Did I take a class at Scripps? I don't think so. Anyway, I took a class called Theories of the Good Life, which was for seniors only. And it was a philosophy class on what does it mean to have a good life. And there were a variety of philosophical viewpoints on that. Pick up The Death of Ivan Illig in your travels, if you would. This is one of those things where you're like, well, I was supposed to do this, and this because everybody else does it, or they tell you it's the thing to do. So I think going to college because someone else tells you to is maybe not the right reason. But on the other hand, you get people now saying, well, I didn't go to college. I don't think anyone needs to go to college. Look at Bill Gates. Look at Mark Zuckerberg. They dropped out of college. And you're like, well, you're not Mark Gates. You're not Bill Gates. And you're not Mark Zuckerberg. So those are the exceptions. But sometimes people use exceptions as justification. We'll see how that works out. But anyway, I think if they save the class for the senior year, they could probably teach it in the first year. Might be a better setup for the college career. But anyway, it was a useful class and good for reflection. And that's what philosophy is one of the good things about philosophy is you get to do that. Now into the working world. After my first interview for my first job in Silicon Valley at Supermac, which I've talked about before, wherein my interviewers told me later, after I was working with them for a while, that I was a completely different and arguably more interesting. I think that's how they told me it. This story, personality, a more interesting personality than I had demonstrated during the interview sessions, wherein I gave textbook answers, as they put it. I decided to be more creative in the types of jobs I pursued and the way I conducted interviews from my side of the table into the future, which I did. Always flip the question around so that they are answering me, things like this. These are pretty standard tricks, but in practice, they come naturally if you're actually interested in a particular role in a particular company, then if you start asking real questions like someone who is interested, the person interviewing you will pick up on that. You could always see it in their face. Like, oh, you're actually challenging me with some of these questions. Interesting. Silicon Valley was an interesting place in general. So many jobs all the time. Who doesn't miss those days? Those days when, how many job offers do I have today? Though it did lead in part to the mess in which we find ourselves today. So good with the bad, bad with the good, one of those. And by the way, Silicon Valley was full of polymaths, some of them autodidactic, some of them much more sort of traditional academic into the workplace. But Silicon Valley was not a place where you're going to be a career. I'm not going to be at the same company for 40 years. So it was a different mindset in those times. And that persists today, arguably. Some people aren't going to be at the same place for 40 days, much less 40 years. Something I always mentioned, either in an interview context or in general, and I still do, was that I would rather do something I had not done than do something I had been doing already. So in other words, hey, this is a job putting square pegs in round holes. Oh, I've done that for 10 years. Therefore, I'm not interested in doing that. In other words, the sum of my relevant experiences may be better for my future employer than might be those of a candidate with only specific experience, if that makes sense. So thus, I was always learning new things in all of my various career moves. And during the window of time that I was in Silicon Valley, to 1993 to 2001 and 2005 to 2013, more so in that first period, they were so in need of knowledge workers, people who had the ability to pivot. When you take it, so most of the time when I took a job based on a job role or description of that role, things would change. So often what people would do is, well, today, the traditional way of hiring someone is you say, oh, we had a person sitting in this chair who had this apparent skill set and this is what they were doing. So we just need that. And if you hire someone who has the exact same skill set and whatnot, then they're going to do what's within their range of knowledge if they're not thinking outside the box and so on. But if you find someone who has done relevant but not specifically similar things, then they will take a different view on what needs to be accomplished. They may say, this works, but in my experience, when I was at band camp, that kind of thing. So as long as people are patient with that desire to do things differently, sometimes some good stuff will fall out of it. I have found in my travels through various work scenarios that being good at a particular job is not unusual. Often people who have been at it for a while figure out how to do what needs to be done. They're fine. Everybody knows who oh yeah, that's so-and-so. He's been here for 10 years. He's totally good at whatever, fill in the blank. The people who make a difference tend to step outside their job description to solve problems in a larger scope, or maybe help others to solve something that's maybe related or maybe not, some adjacent or more distant challenge. Since, the good of the company and all, which is usually not awful. I suppose it depends on what the company does. When I was working at True Vision, I think this is the first time this really happened in my career. So this was in 96, I think it was. I was working at True Vision, video capture hardware. This is before you could capture 8K video on a phone. I wish someone had said, hey, you guys, in the future, not only will you be carrying cell phones in your pocket for like pennies, compared to what was available at the time, but you'll be able to capture video in that phone and then upload it to like insanity. It was so difficult at the time to capture normal NTSC or PAL video, 640 by 480 or 768 by 576, if I'm remembering correctly. So that was a challenge to capture that stuff without dropping frames, doing motion JPEG compression until MPEG came out in full force, which some variation of that can be found today in H.264 and all that stuff. So back in those days, it was really a challenge. And our system architect for the Target 2000, Ray Picard, super nice guy, brilliant. He basically knew the system backwards and forwards, but kind of stayed in that box. So one day we were looking at this problem where, so when you drop a frame, you can see a visible stutter, right? So if you were watching a movie or a TV show that you've produced on the Target 2000, and while you were capturing your source footage, or bringing in something from a Betacam deck or whatever source, while you're capturing it, analog and digitizing it, if you had to drop a frame, you'll see it there'll be some tearing perhaps, or so it'll look like you can see a line through the frame because it picked up one frame or field even and another field, but they weren't in sequence because one of them disappeared all of a sudden. So you'll see a tearing or sometimes a stuttering. There's all kinds of visual artifacts that become apparent. Totally unacceptable, right? So what the Target 2000 system would do, it was a board you would plug into your computer. And again, everything that Target 2000 was doing can be done on your phone at this point. But we were walking before we could run. So what it would do is the software that Ray was in charge of would there was a buffer, what buffering is in this modern era. So frame data, field data would be coming in. So we're digitizing a field. And if the buffer on the card filled up completely, it would say, okay, well, we got to drop a frame. We got to drop a field. So you could drop a field or a frame or multiple. And that's where you get your stuttering, or your more likely just a jump cut. Yeah. So it was just, stuttering, I guess, would not really, well, all these things were artifacts of like losing data or not accommodating limitations of the system in general. So the reason I'm saying all this, I was closer to college where we learned all about our systems, feedback control systems, set points, error signals, PID controllers. I mentioned this in the labs episode as well. So the Target 2000 could vary what's called the Q factor for motion JPEG. Q is the amount of compression, the quality of the resulting compressed frame. So the higher the Q factor, the lower the compression. So the larger the data size. I think I have that right. I haven't done this in a while. JPEG Q factor. JPEG Q between 0 and 100 controls the level of compression. A high Q factor means less compression, so higher quality. So I said one day, hey Ray, why does this system with a variable Q factor wait until it has already started dropping frames to first of all drop frames, and then second drop the Q factor, and it would drop it abruptly. So not only would you get maybe tearing, but more likely and then maybe less likely stuttering. So you'd either get tearing or more likely just choppy video, right? So how come it waits till the end? Like it's too late to do anything about it. I said, what if you had a set point somewhere, like say half of the buffer. So the buffer's allowed to get half full or half empty. And then you start lowering the Q value so that you maintain that buffer rate. Now, this system would be self-adapting because whatever your disk system was capturing this video would determine how quickly the data could move through from the buffer through the, I can't remember what they called it, but the sort of system on a chip that would manage video frames and compression, motion JPEG compression, and so on, and then move it across the bus to a disk system, right? So fairly complicated system with a lot of moving parts, digitally moving parts. So if the disks were not keeping up, that was one way to make that buffer fill up, right? Because you have incoming data that can't get off to disk, so it could be removed from the buffer. So I said, what if you make the set point about halfway, and then if the set point starts dropping, you can increase the Q level, and if it starts increasing, or not the set point, but the level of data in the buffer, if it starts exceeding that set point, right? So buffer's filling up faster than you planned, you start lowering the Q factor, so the frames become a little bit smaller, higher compression, which then leads to a reduction in buffer data size per field. And then this will hopefully either maintain the buffer level wherever it is, or will ideally drive it back towards your set point, which is how feedback control systems work in general. I'll leave it there. I don't want to go too nerdy, but Ray looked at me and was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. So in fact, most people do know exactly what that is because you all have a thermostat in your home, or you've used an oven. There's so many systems around us that do almost exactly the same thing that I was proposing. So it was a matter of applying it to this system. And he said, that should be pretty easy to do, actually. So if you start by saying, okay, we have a buffer of a certain size, so let's try to keep it half full. And then you can look at how fast it's changing. That will help you determine how fast your disk is able to write data. So to get it through the pipeline of creating the compressed stream. So you can adjust your Q factor to keep it at halfway, and that would affect the entire workflow or data flow through the system. So there you go. There was no reason to apply control system theory, especially analog control system theory. PID control is traditionally an analog system. It can be applied digitally. State space, if you're doing digital, would be more a thing. But no need for such complication. Just look at the difference between the half fullness and the actual fullness, and then apply a Q factor change to drive the Q in the direction, to drive the total buffer size towards the set point. Done. So I think that did have a generally good impact once we got that going. Maybe that story went on for a little bit longer, but we're near the end, I promise. So every single thing anyone might want to know about just about everything is reachable online in one way or another today. If you've ever seen those Quest commercials from way back when, the first fiber optic commercials, if you ever want to see every movie ever made in every language, ride the light, something like that. For better or worse, anyone can put anything they want online too, which is a challenge. So sometimes people will come across something entertaining over something accurate when it comes to doing our own research. But for those interested in actually learning, in being self-taught, if they're autodidactic, we have an embarrassment of riches before us. I myself read articles about a myriad of topics: current events, history, economics, biosciences, technology of all types, and the list goes on a daily basis. And I still check out digital library books online, of course. I have to be honest, I haven't walked into a library building in years. I mean, I'm trying to remember if I went before the pandemic lockdowns or right after. Might have been before. So yeah, libraries. You'd think I would, I do have the momentum. I just don't find libraries to be, they're pretty much not geared for adults, for better or worse. So they do have an adult learning center at the library nearest where I live, my home. It was empty, but they have a lot of resources for younger people. So it'd be nice if they would take advantage of that. Obviously, there are many things going on in the world today. I think having a ton of intellectual curiosity and putting that to use with so many resources available and at our fingertips, literally and figuratively, is a moral imperative. Even if these were boring times, it's still a moral imperative. You should always be never stop learning, learn every day. These are good notions. To be honest, a lack of that intellectual curiosity, which is something I see all too often, though it can still be found. The intellectual curiosity can still be found, luckily, just not everywhere. It's almost certainly going to be our undoing in the near term, or maybe in the longer arc of history for some population down the road. Yeah, we'll see. I consider myself still a reasonably autodidactic polymath. I could be more so, of course, but the real question one might ask, is there success to be had in this mode? The ability, the interest to learn a great many things about a great many things as we like on our own. Still waiting to learn whether success is to be had. Fingers crossed, fingers crossed. So that's all I have to say about that for now. I read a lot. I do audiobooks a lot, and I think I've mentioned this before. Some people will say, oh, audiobooks that's not the same as reading, and typing is not the same as writing with your hand. There's a different memory mechanism. There's a different way that we gain understanding based on whether we hear it or we look at it, or we're, so reading a book versus listening to someone else read the book to us. I don't know if I found that to be true for myself. I find audiobooks while I'm out walking, or that's pretty much, walking at the gym. But in general, if I can have something to listen to that is educational or good reference material, or sometimes entertaining or thought-provoking, all of those things in some combination, I find that to be highly valuable. I tend to read articles voraciously about a great many topics. I tend to listen to books. So if there's an article that's a page or two or three, I'll zip through it really quickly. And I have a collection of bookmarks that has got to be 1,000,000 at this point. I don't even know. It takes too long to synchronize the bookmark database. So that's a little thing I want to address at some point. But anyway, a lot of bookmarks, about probably, some 10% or so is probably useless and missing spider web content, but they're out there. And so yeah, it's really kind of a nonstop thing. I consider myself definitely a polymath to some degree. I'm not expert in all things yet, but autodidactic, standing on the shoulders of a lot of giants. So that one, I don't know if anybody really can be at any, in these modern times, unless you are living on an island, learning how to start fires and going from there. I think we're pretty much all benefiting from all those giants, which is a good thing. And I wish more people would do that. And that is all I have to say about that. Thank you for listening as always. My clock says 1 hour, 5 minutes, about 20 seconds. So I'm going to guess pretty close to an hour when I truncate all the silences out. We'll find out. Thank you for listening as always. Take care and go read a book or listen to one.